Morning, everyone. I'm Tim Haab. I'm the director of the School of Environment and Natural Resources here at Ohio State, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first Environmental Professional Network program of 2025. So it's glad to kick off a new year, and we have an exciting schedule for the year. I want to welcome everybody here in the room, but also welcome everybody that's online via our YouTube live stream. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Also want to thank Josh Knights, who's here in the front. Josh is going to serve as our moderator here today, but he's also with the Sustainability Institute here at Ohio State, and they serve as one of our sponsors for today's programs. We're looking forward to having Josh moderate today. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, including a representative from IGS Energy, a dairy farmer who's worked with IGS to implement a methane capturing project on his farm, contributes to the local biogas energy supply. We also have the CEO of the Ohio Dairy Producers Association and two agricultural engineering researchers. I want to thank all of the everyone here from IGS Energy. Want to thank you for your support. I know there's many in attendance here today. On your tables are a couple of brochures. We ask that you share those around the table for anybody that's in the room, or you can scan the QR code that's on the brochure or on the placard on your table, and that'll give you the brochure electronically. We have a number of students here in the room and a number of students joining us online. All of the students have been able to join us for free thanks to a number of sponsorships that we have. That includes NG North America, Ohio State Energy Partners, the School of Environment and Natural Resources, the Sustainability Institute, our FOD operations, our operations group here at the university, and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Wildlife. So thank you to all of our sponsors. All of our sponsors are listed on the back of the brochure, so you can take a look at those. Sponsorship support allows us to offer low-cost participation to students who are the next generation of environmental professionals. Also, sponsorship allows us to connect with a wider audience by helping us to provide our live streaming formatted EPN Breakfast programs. If you're joining us online, you can submit questions through the chat function. Feel free to share your thoughts, comments, questions. Our team will be reviewing those questions, and when we have the panel up here we'll be able to take those questions, and the in-person audience will have microphones floating around so that you can ask questions also. Okay. Today is a zero waste event. We're proud that we have the official designation from the university. We ask that any of your scarlet materials that you have, the reusable cups and plates, you can dispose of those in the bins over here. Also, any of your other waste, the bins are labeled so that you can dispose of those correctly. So thanks for that. Keep things short this morning. We have a number of speakers that are going to be coming up, so I'm going to turn it over to Josh, and Josh is going to lead us through today's program.
Tim, thanks for the introduction. We really appreciate the collaboration we've had between EPN and the Sustainability Institute over these years to develop a number of programs, including today's. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Sustainability Institute, we're part of the Office of Research, Innovation, and Knowledge at Ohio State. We help faculty and students to solve critical sustainability challenges through research, innovation, education, and partnerships. And you can learn more about our work at si.osu.edu. All right, crowd participation time. How many of you made a New Year's resolution? Wow. Okay, it's a very wise group. Only a few of you actually made a New Year's resolution. So I recently read an article about New Year's resolutions that really rang true for me. The article said that we usually apply a punishment mentality when we make our New Year's resolutions. So what should I sacrifice or give up? What should I cut out in terms of sweets, drinking less alcohol? I'm going to wake up early in the morning, drive in the dark when it's cold to go exercise. I'm going to spend less time looking at funny cat videos on social media. Yeah, you're nodding. So there's no doubt these resolutions would be beneficial, but they really make us pretty miserable in the process. And as a result, they don't last very long. So I think the public thinks sustainability is the same thing as making a New Year's resolution. They think it's about making personal sacrifices. They think it's about giving up something you enjoy, limiting your options, paying more for a greener product. And like a New Year's resolution, when you don't follow through on it, it makes you feel very guilty. But here's the good news. That is a very outdated view of sustainability. Sustainability is really about finding those untapped synergies that are often right under our noses. It's about figuring out a way to harness them for the public good. So often there needs to be a catalyst, something like an innovation in a research lab, an incentive provided by the government, or even an economic opportunity created by business. And today's program is a great example of what I mean. So we know that methane from livestock operations is a greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. And we also know that it's a fuel that can heat our homes, our schools, and our places of work. We need a way to connect the two, and in this case, we're doing it through a methane digester to turn a liability into an asset. Now, methane digesters, they certainly don't represent a new technology, but as Jordan will explain, there's a lot of challenges and kinks to work out. And capturing methane generated by livestock operations has raised some questions about cost effectiveness as well as the net impact on climate and the environment. But the process has great support from both sides of the political aisle, which is unusual in this day, and it's been expanding in recent years to a lot of dairy operations. So we felt a deeper dive into this topic was worth our time this morning. All right, for today's program, we're going to start with Jordan Couch. He's going to talk a little bit about the basics of how a biogas operation works. He's Senior Manager of Biogas Operations at IGS Energy. He's going to walk through how the operation works from a technical standpoint, and then also what IGS is doing that might set it apart from other efforts to capture methane from livestock. And I am pleased to point out that IGS Energy has been a core partner of the Sustainability Institute since 2021. After Jordan, we have two leaders from the Ohio dairy industry who are going to shed some light on the commitment by dairy farmers to being good stewards of the land. Eddie O'Donnell is owner of Irish Acres Dairy, the site of one of IGS's methane digesters. And we're also going to get a broader industry perspective from Scott Higgins, President and CEO of the American Dairy Association Mideast and CEO of the Ohio Dairy Producers Association. All right, then in an act of academic sadism, we're going to squeeze two professors into a 15-minute time slot. We have Dr. Ajay Shah and Dr. Fred Michel from the Department of Food, Agricultural, and Biological Engineering. They're going to give us a sneak peek at what lies ahead on the horizon to mitigate methane and convert biogas into clean energy, thanks to research that's taking place right here at Ohio State. And then after the presentations, it's going to be your opportunity to ask questions. And so be thinking about those as you hear the presentations, write them down. And again, we encourage those of you online to put your questions into the chat. All right, now I'm going to hoof it on out of here and give the podium to Jordan, who's going to go ahead and start. And Harrison, I may need, I think I've done something horrible to your computer here with,
There we go.
with a touch screen, so you might need to help us out. So, Jordan.
Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning?
Great.
First off, I want to say thank you to Tim, Josh, and Harrison for all the efforts you put in and for the opportunity for me to speak here this morning. Another big thank you I want to give is to my biggest supporter for the last 23 years, my wife. Without further ado, let's talk shit. So, with that being said, first off and foremost, it takes a great partnership like Eddie O'Donnell and a dairy farm to start this process. To explain the process, basically, we're taking the cow manure into a feed pit and then dispersing it into digester tanks. Each one of our tanks are about 1 million gallon capacity. At this location, we have 2 digesters. The digester, or the digestate, is being heated by a fairly large boiler, 2.5 million BTU boiler. After the gas is created, it's captured under a dome, created under a dome, captured, and then basically purified using upgrade equipment. This upgrade equipment is located in the far west area of our site here. To give you perspective, basically from one end to the other is about 300 yards, or 3 football fields. So basically we're starting in this area where we received the manure from the farm, and then it is being flowed through a valve panel in this location here, a valve pit, to direct flow evenly to each one of the digesters. Each one of the digesters are receiving about 30,000 gallons per day input and the same output. As it flows into the digesters, this is literally our reception pit right here where we're receiving the waste from the farm, and this is actually through a very small window into one of the digesters as it was being filled. We have a central support post for the ceiling, and we have an inner and outer membrane. The outer membrane is kept inflated at all times to repel rain and snow. The inner membrane will fluctuate anywhere from about 7 feet to 14 feet depending on the methane production. As you can see, we have mixers. You can't see the propeller. Basically, it's like an old boat propeller on about an 18-foot long shaft driven by a 3-phase electric motor. There is 3 electric motors in each one of these digesters. Again, the digesters are 1 million gallon capacity. We're running each one at about 850,000 gallons of manure to try and give us a little bit of room for safety reasons. Big thing during this process is you want a constant mixture of the manure to keep an even flow and prevent, believe it or not, any crusting. If you don't have a good mixture, there will actually create a crust on the top of the manure that could actually hold pressure. Now, believe it or not, if anybody's familiar with inches of water column, we're not talking PSI, this is a fraction of 1 PSI. Our pressure relief valves in these digesters will actually go off at 2 inches of water column. So trying to maintain a 1 inch of water column pressure constantly is a little bit of a battle, and dealing with programmers or working with programmers to create the proper set points has been constant. Yes. So this is obviously an aerial view. You can see it's dropped in temperature. We've got steam from our boiler, which is in between each of the digesters. So once we're up to temperature, which is right around 97 degrees Fahrenheit in the manure for optimal gas production, we are then coming from each one of the digesters. We have a pipe with a blower at the bottom here, and then sending the gas into the upgrade area. At this point, we're about 62% methane content, and the rest of that is undesirable, CO2, ammonia, or H2S, hydrogen sulfide. So if the upgrade equipment is not running, we have a candlestick flare over on the right in this area right here, which could have up to a 6 to 8 foot tall flame if the upgrading equipment is not online. Now, the upgrade equipment should be running all the time. And if there's a problem, we obviously want to fix the problem and get it back up and going as quickly as possible. And that flame should pretty much never be seen if the equipment is operating properly. Next to that is a enclosed flare, which for the upgrading equipment, which is all right here, we're using a PSA scrubbing vessel to purify the methane. And believe it or not, from manure, we can create ultra pure methane. We're talking like 99.8% pure methane, which we found out was actually higher quality than what's in our natural gas pipeline, heating our homes, businesses. So from here, this is the upgrading equipment, PSA vessels. It's a constant cycle of gas through pressure swing absorption vessels, and it has media in it that will take the undesirable gas out. At this point, we're sending it to a dryer. So anybody familiar with compression? Moisture is a bad thing. It does not compress, it breaks things. So we want our gas before it is compressed to be ultra dry. So this little enclosure back here is a rotary compressor. It actually looks like an old prop engine. It's a 4-stage. We're taking inlet pressure of about 13 PSI and compress it up to as high as 4,500 PSI. So from our compressor, we're going into specialized trailers. These have type 4 CNG tanks, which are rated for about 6,000 PSI. We'll be filling them to around 4,000 PSI. We do a temperature compensated fill. So at about 70 degrees ambient temperature, it's 3,600 PSI as target filling pressure. And depending on our trailer design, which we have 3, we're creating enough methane. It's 350 decatherm for this particular trailer, or about 350,000 standard cubic feet. And to put that into perspective, on an annual basis, this size farm will create enough methane to heat about 4,000 homes. On top of that, from here, we're going to our injection site where we are decanting. We're taking that 4,000 or 3,600 at 70 degrees ambient temperature, hooking up to a hose pole, and we regulate the pressure down to just above the pipeline pressure. And at our injection site in Convoy, Ohio, pipeline pressure on average is about 750 PSI. So we're usually about 780 to 790 when we're decanting into the pipeline. So once the trailer pressure drops to about 1,000 PSI, it's no longer free flowing, and we don't want to leave that gas in the trailer. We want to use as much as possible. So at that point, we switch over to special two-stage compressors. And as you can see here, we've got 8 trailers, all these specialty built trailers at our injection site, and our hose poles, our decanters over here. So once we get down to about 1,000 PSI, we then switch over to compression, and we're regulating the pressure from 1,000 PSI down to about 180 going into our compressor inlet. And the discharge is same thing, about 780 to 790, free flowing into the natural gas pipeline. On top of that free flow, when we first start the process, we actually have what's called a gas chromatograph. We have to be within a certain standard for us to be able to flow into the pipeline. So for the first 10 minutes, we're not flowing at all, other than through a small 1/8-inch tube going to our gas analyzer. Once it passes the test, then everything starts. We're flowing again from the 3,600 PSI down to 1,000 and then compressing from there at that point. On top of that, one of the last vessels that we have right about here is an H2S absorber. So if we do have, say 4 parts per million, which is the maximum allowable to go into the pipeline, we're actually able to get that down to like 1.5 before it actually goes into TC Energy's pipeline. So not only do we have to ensure both at the farms before we fill a trailer that our gas is of the highest quality, but also at the injection site before it goes into TC Energy's pipeline. And then TC Energy also has their own gas chromatograph to double check us. Once we go into the natural gas pipeline, one of the big reasons that IGS has decided to go this route with biogas creation is we've been involved in compressed natural gas fueling for about 13 to 14 years now. This is one of our compressed natural gas fueling locations, and partnering up with many companies across Ohio, like Montgomery County here, which utilizes compressed natural gas fueling for their semis, for their dump trucks, for light-duty vehicles, along with many more. Like we assist Ohio State's transit, campus transit, with their CNG fueling station. Rumpke is a very large partner of ours all over Ohio. 95% of their garbage trucks run on compressed natural gas. Going back a few slides, this semi right here, it is the first vehicle that has actually been designed with an engine specifically for natural gas. Most vehicles that burn natural gas, especially heavy-duty vehicles, they were diesel engines that were converted over to burn natural gas. And if anybody knows anything about a diesel engine, they tend to run cool. Natural gas burns very hot, so causes problems. The other thing is the max tow rating, or GVW, for a semi with the 12-liter Cummins has been about 85,000 pounds. With the X15N in this semi, it's putting it on the same plane as the diesel engines, which is about 150,000 pounds. We actually have purchased it specifically for companies with fleets to try it to see if it's something that they would like to further themselves into. We have some companies with 120, 200 semis that they're looking to convert their fleet over to clean burning natural gas. So Rumpke, Central Ohio Transit Authority, serving the greater Columbus area. One of the other things I wanted to point out, this is off of CARB's website as of this month. The carbon intensity score for fueling options. And as you can see, and it's actually so far negative carbon score that you can't completely read it, bio CNG. To be able to say that we use something that's that far negative, you got a 0 mark right about here, is amazing. I mean, the fact that we can take a waste product and create ultra pure methane and then be able to use it as a clean fuel source is amazing. That's all I got. Next up is Eddie O'Donnell, great guy, great partner. Couldn't ask for a better person to deal with on a daily and weekly basis.
Good morning. Thanks for the invite. Earlier this morning, my wife warned me not to mention national championship. And living in Indiana, there's a side to that too. The other thing was, do not mention Michigan. I have no idea why that is, but somebody said that it was probably the best motivator that Ohio ever had. Is that right? Let me begin by, as my bio suggests, I grew up in Ireland, Northwest Ireland, one of a large family. And you know, from times gone by with immigration, it was a natural thing for me as a member of a large family to seek beyond where I grew up. After completing high school and ag college, I found myself in Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, managing a dairy farm, which is probably in itself a unique experience. This was an Irish company that, after the oil boom in Saudi Arabia in the early 70s, found themselves wanting to develop agriculture, and especially dairy farming. It was pioneering there. It was really a pioneering effort. And I found myself, we were actually milking American cows in the deserts of Saudi Arabia in probably the most arid conditions that one could imagine. So it was pioneering for sure. But we were under the guidance of, and we had some very good support from US ag, and I'm talking about a veterinarian, a nutritionist, and people that had experience in the dairy industry. So it was that's kind of sort of where my background came from. So it was a pretty natural evolution for me to come to the US to continue on in dairy farming. When we came to the U.S. as actually as an investor in a dairy project, large dairies in the Midwest was a pretty new phenomenon 20 years ago, because most dairies were family farms, 100 cows, 200 cows. So progressing to a larger dairy of 1,500, 2,000 cows was a major step. And it was one where the local community had to be brought along or had to buy into this. And I'm talking about 20 years ago when it was a pretty major step to do that. Larger dairies relied on great relationships with local family farms to produce feed. In return, we were producing. We were actually producing a lot of manure or fertilizer that could be used on these smaller dairy or smaller grain growing operations, which was a win-win situation for both. A 2,000 cow dairy requires approximately 25,000 tons of corn silage, 5,000 tons of alfalfa haylage, and 400 tons of straw on an annual basis. So that is quite a large farming operation, and when you're dealing with local farmers, you're actually touching a lot of family farms in the process. In return, we produce, on a 2,000 cow dairy, we produce about 50 million pounds of milk annually, and 20 million gallons of manure is generated. Approximately 25 jobs are created, direct jobs are created with that, and at least as many more in secondary and processing. In recent years, dairy cows have been, certainly with high forage intakes, have become synonymous with methane gas production, which in turn leads to interest in developing systems to harness the gas and for renewable energy, carbon credits, offsets, etc. From a dairy's perspective, this is an additional revenue source to offset the cost of manure applications on neighboring farms. When I heard Jeff Shaner from Dairy BC give a presentation at a dairy conference approximately 3 years ago, I felt it would be a very suitable side-by-side operation to a dairy farm. Our dairy systems really lend themselves they're unique in the sense that we have a uniform liquid manure supply 24/7, 365. With innovation and technology, we're only beginning the path to utilize all aspects of what we call waste. And I think about fertilizer values, organic matter, nutrient applications and growing crops, water purification. These are all possibilities in the future. Now, key to success is very much knowledge and application and the resources to get the job done. And to that end, IGS have been exceptional in that field. From Irish Acres perspective, IGS have been excellent to work with, on-site coexisting during the construction phase. The day-to-day operations of the dairy were uninterrupted. ODA has also played a large role in this. Firstly, to get the project permitted and to oversee that we comply with careful rules and regulations. Takeaways are good for the dairy industry, good for the environment, and I think it's just the beginning of all of these possibilities in the future. That's about all I've got. So thanks again for the invite and the time involved. Next up.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be with you folks this morning, and for those that are online, you didn't venture out into the 9-degree weather, so stay cozy in your nice comfy clothes and enjoy your coffee and listen away. I'm really honored to represent Ohio's dairy farmers. In fact, I go beyond that. I've been serving in the dairy industry since I graduated from Ohio State in 1984. I'm an ag econ major from this university, and I take great pride in bleeding scarlet, if you will. And I'm excited about next Monday night. So that championship game is going to be a thriller for us. So with that said, though, I'm even more thrilled to have the privilege and the opportunity to have been able to work with dairy farmers and for dairy farmers for the last 40 years. It's been a thrill because I've been able to watch the families that I grew up with showing cattle, taking care of cattle, and going to the university and learning about them and being a part of their solution. A lot of people don't realize this, but back in 1983, the United States dairy industry was capped out at about 120 billion pounds of milk production being sold directly to consumers. At that very time, they also were overproducing because there was an artificial stimulus in the federal government that said that ever since World War II, we need to make sure there's plenty of milk and dairy products to serve our troops and to meet the needs of our consumers. And so the milk pricing structure was incentivizing milk production in excess of 17 billion pounds more than the market could bear. I was a student here at Ohio State University under the instruction of Dr. Bob Jacobson, and I remember studying that, and we were talking about the dairy industry's potential. What will they do, and what will the dairy industry do to work its way out of a 17 billion pound surplus and still maintain the integrity and the survival and the vitality of a dairy farms? When we did the math, 17 billion pounds at that time represented about 5 states worth of milk production, and that included Ohio. We were just about 4.6 billion pounds at the time. And so what I'm standing in front of you to say today is, as a result of dairy farmers like Eddie O'Donnell and all of his peers, whether they milk 30 cows, 3,000 cows, or 30,000 cows, dairy farmers around the United States have worked together individually, knowing that each one of them do it differently. And if you've been on one farm, you've been on one farm. because everybody farms differently. And I think that's really important to note. But the dairy industry has taken upon itself to collaborate, to work together. And so what I'm going to represent to you today is the vitality of the dairy industry as a result of dairy farmers partnering and pioneering and working together on dairy promotion, environmental stewardship, sustainability, and the future of innovation and the types of dairy products that consumers are going to continue to desire to meet their personal, nutritional, and health needs. So as a result of that, and I'm advancing the slides myself, right? There we go. I'm standing in front of you, but I work for two organizations. The American Dairy Association Mideast, which is the checkoff program. Some of you may be familiar with that, what that is called. That's the advertising and marketing program. Every dairy farmer in the United States invests 15 cents a hundredweight, and it is up to the staff and the boards of directors that represent those funds to maintain the purpose of that is to sell more dairy to consumers, to find ways to make sure that consumers get the information they need on nutrition, the value of nutrition, and the work that dairy farmers put into that to make sure that consumers are trustworthy of what we sell. So it's all about consumer confidence. And so just summarize that. And then the advocacy side is the Ohio Dairy Producers Association. And dairy farmers in Ohio have the opportunity to be a member of this organization, and it is under their direction that I'm commissioned and work and get reimbursed for my time from this organization to work on advocacy, legislative, and environmental issues and things of that nature. So lots of things like that. But what I'm most excited to tell you about is an initiative that started back in 2008. And I'm going to get to the point here in just a minute about why this is so important. The work that's being done on Eddie's farm, the work that is being done by IGS, the work that is being done by these companies has to go through a process of understanding, first of all, what do the consumers want? What does the marketplace want from us? What are expectations? I'd venture to say that most all of you have an opinion. And when you try to collect millions of opinions and then justify them and put them into context, you have to have some organization that can do that for you. So in short, we formed the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy. There were a number of things that were coming at us in 2000, in the 2000s. Actually, it goes way back to early 2000s. But in 2008, 9, and 10, there was a lot of concern around animal care. And so the dairy industry said, well, we're taking great care of our animals. Let's prove it. So we developed a program to develop a proof point to say, we're taking care of our livestock. Next thing is, well, are you taking care of your employees? Well, of course we are. Our families and our workers that work on our farms are well cared for. Well, demonstrate that, prove that. So we developed a process to collect that data and to share that. And then the next thing comes around, well, what about the environment? In 2008, Walmart comes out and starts asking lots of tough questions. And so the dairy industry didn't have what we call an LCA, a life cycle assessment, right, for milk. Well, there was an expectation that there be one. And so the dairy promotion organizations, in collaboration with the National Milk Producers Federation and International Dairy Foods, all of us got together and started this initiative called Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy to prove to consumers that we can take care of and make sure that we have a healthy people, healthy products, and a healthy planet. How we do that is through collaboration. It's absolutely essential to note the fact that we work on a pre-competitive basis. There is no opportunity for a company to get ahead of anybody else based on the learnings and the findings they have. It's all being shared up front, and it's up to each individual organization to do that themselves. And then we work together to speak as one voice. This is really important. While Eddie and I stand here, we're representing dairy farmers in Ohio, there's a lot more people that we are actually dependent upon to work together with us. The brands that sit at the table at the national level, and this doesn't include all the processors and manufacturers that I partner with here in Ohio and in West Virginia as well, but the companies that sit at the table that have decided to shoulder the challenge together with dairy farmers are listed here. Actually, this says 27. There were over 30 now. And over 550 individuals who contribute time and talent and efforts to be able to navigate through the challenges that we're talking about today. For example, one in particular, sustainability. So there are technical experts that step up and work with us in this field. All to say this, the dairy industry collaborated to come up with a strategic plan to communicate to our consumer audience that we are going to do the right thing for the environment. Everybody loves to eat. We love our dairy foods. We love our milk, our ice cream, our cheese, or we're in a love affair with cheese in the United States. We're at 40 pounds per person now in cheese consumption. Oh, but folks, we haven't even become close to what Denmark consumes, is which over 65 pounds per person. Just give an example of where, the bar's been set, and it's like on the football field, you just keep rising, So we're gonna keep selling cheese. And we have the best cheese in the United States and Ohio, and that's our holy cheese. Our Swiss cheese. And so, we just keep making that. So I'm very proud of that, of course. But the point I'm making here is consumers want to know that you're doing the right thing. The way to do that is to power up and make sure that we are working together and we set these goals. 1, greenhouse gas neutrality. What are we doing to make sure that, while it was just stated earlier, methane has an impact on the environment? Okay, well, there are all sorts of new things that we learn about through science, and how are we going to deal with it? So we decided, let's work on a pathway, and we call it the Net Zero Initiative. And so we are working on achieving greenhouse gas neutrality, not for every single farm to implement. A 30-cow dairy has its own business strategy versus a 3,000-cow dairy or a 30,000-cow dairy. So the point I'm making is there's no one-size-fits-all. Secondly, optimizing water use while utilizing maximum recycling. I don't know if you folks know this or not, but dairy farms recycle water 4, 5, 6 times on the farm before it ever makes its way into the lagoon, or through the digester in this case. And then lastly, one that I've taken very serious, and Ohio's dairy farmers are very serious about, is improving water quality by optimizing the utilization of manure and nutrients. Let me just say this. When it comes to manure and manure management, manure is the first natural fertilizer available to mankind. Utilizing it effectively on a 60-cow dairy, on my grandpa had 18 cows on 60 acres, and he never bought an ounce of fertilizer. Well, you can't raise 6 kids on 18 cows today. So my dad ended up going to 65 cows, and we eventually at 90 cows. Farms continue to grow in size to be able to withhold and to be able to take care of family operations. And so as a result of that, we started to have more cows concentrated in a location, and then now we got to start to, store the manure. The process of storing creates an environmental impact that nobody really anticipated, and that is, while manure is all lagooned together, it starts to emit some methane. Well, let's figure out how can we take advantage of that. So we have put together a plan, and I'm going to try to cut this short now because I'm running low on time here. I just wanted to point out a couple quick things. The U.S. dairy industry represents less than 2% of the greenhouse gas footprint for as part of agriculture. And since 2017, we are now using 30% less water, 20% less land than we did in 2007. And even a more amazing statistic is from 1944 to 2007, we actually had dairy farmers are using 65% less water, 90% less land to produce 60% more milk. We know how to take care of cows. The genetics that we've learned to to breed and to generate milk-producing cows on less feed, less environment, we have basically is this. Efficiencies at our farm has achieved more sustainability than we're probably going to be able to achieve just through these extra programs that we're putting in place. Not to discount the initiatives we're putting in place, but it really is important to note we've been doing a lot of work. Here's the group that I'm a part of. The Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy has a Dairy Sustainability Alliance. This group set in motion a net zero initiative where we are working on feed additives, enteric methane, manure, and energy. And in the end of the day, we are listening to consumers. They are asking us, 70% said that they want sustainable practices to be implemented and they want to be visible to the consumer. So we got to tell our story better, right? So what's the checkoff program do? We're following our dairy farmers and saying, let us tell your story. So as this new digester system has been up and running, the next thing we're going to be out there was our cameras and our crews, and we're going to be videotaping and showing consumers what we're all about. So all that to say that we have to have partnerships to make this happen. We work through the Dairy Management Incorporated, IDFA, a Nutrient as a company that works with us on making sure that the technologies that dairy farmers are being introduced have sound practices, and we don't have folks out here selling us bills and goods that may never work. Dairy farmers need to make sure that if we're going to spend millions of dollars on something, would you make sure that it's going to work for me? So Nutrient is that entity that we channel all those energies through. I'm going to wrap up by just pointing this out. We're in the process right now of mitigating dairy's environmental footprint. What we're talking about today is the manure methane, not the enteric methane, which causes a cow burps. We've got feed additives and a greener cattle initiative that's being worked on that. But what we're working on is the manure. Anaerobic digestion is a solution, an environmental solution, and it's exciting to see the opportunities that we, as dairy industry, continue to produce an abundance of milk at a very reasonable price, and to be able to also then use the technologies to draw down the amount of methane that is emitted and turn it into something that consumers need, and that is energy to heat their homes and to run their vehicles. So we are using this opportunity. And right now in the United States, there are over 370 digesters. 90% of them are from dairy farms. And then 10% of the renewable natural gas in the U.S. pipelines could come from dairy, which demonstrates to the general public what an impact dairy farmers can have. And in the end, who benefits? The consumer. Yes, the dairy farmer is going to take advantage of the opportunities, but we do this to feed families. Think about, why are we in the business? We make milk so that we can make cheese, butter, yogurt, and all the delicious products that we have. That's why Eddie's in business. He knows consumers need it. We need to be able to produce it. We couldn't do it on 5,000 dairy farms back in 1983 in Ohio. We're doing it, we're even producing 1 billion pounds more milk in Ohio than we did in 1983 on 1,288 dairy farms, because how efficient and effective they are. But the consumers will benefit because of the energy and the electricity and the improved air quality and the water quality. I can go on, but we'll leave those up to the technical experts. But I'll just wrap up by saying thank you for allowing me to be a part of this program, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A.
Good morning, everyone. And what an excellent presentation, all three presentations before me. I almost forgot that I'm about to talk. I'm Ajay Shah. I'm professor in the Department of Food, Agricultural, and Biological Engineering at Ohio State. And then most of my expertise is on kind of like, my program focuses on enhancing the sustainability of production ag throughout its supply chain, from crop production through end application, use and end application. So after hearing all these talks, I just wanted to share a short story before I go into my slides. So a few years back, maybe 7 or 8 years back, I was not very much familiar I knew what manure was, but I had no work, or I had not worked at all in this area. So then I started, I was in contact with few of the anaerobic digester operators, and then they came up with the issue that, they generate all this biogas, and we talked all the great benefits of it, but they also generated lots of digestate out of when they digested the biomass, they got the gas, but they had sludge or digestate that is left. So it was huge challenge to, at that time, I started kind of thinking through the ways on kind of how can we engineer some solutions to solve it. And I came across this technology called hydrothermal carbonization, and then we'll talk a little bit about it, and then felt like, it may be some promising way to kind of mitigate the issues with disposal of the digestate, and then kind of making the whole system more sustainable. So before I go into the details of the hydrothermal carbonization, just wanted to provide very basic overview of biomass. How can we convert the biomass like animal manure or agricultural residues, forestry residues? It could be municipal waste. So primarily there are different pathways, but one of the mostly used pathway is biomass conversion through biochemical pathway, which includes the methods like anaerobic digestion, fermentation, and we can get different products. And then the other pretty common pathway is thermochemical pathway, in which we use the heat and pressure to convert the biomass into different products, which could be solid, liquid, gas, and lots of different products. So basically, for the feedstock like manure, one of the big challenges manure usually have more than 90% of water, and there are other wet feedstocks like food waste and sewage sludge. They are almost 90 to 95% is water. So it's, I mean, and we heard from our prior speakers that from the farms we can generate enormous amounts of manure. I mean, if we can't utilize it in a good way, it will be waste. But if we can use it in a good way, it could be a resource, huge resource. So with all those water, if we want to kind of like, one of the big application is land application across within certain region. But if we try to haul millions of tons of dairy manure with 90% of water, it will be cost prohibitive, energy prohibitive, and it doesn't make any common sense to do it. Because it will be, I mean, we won't make anything, it will be, so that is where a promising method to process is hydrothermal processing, which is basically use the heat or put the biomass within the closed container or reactor and heat it so that the water within the system will generate the pressure, which is called autogenous pressure, and it actually converts the biomass into different forms. And when I'm saying biomass, in this case, most of the results that I'm presenting is about dairy manure or some of the work we have done, but it can be used for lots of different feedstocks. So if you process it in the range of 180 to 300 degrees Celsius, the dairy manure or any of these wet biomass, which is more than 80% in water content, gets converted to solid form called hydrochar, which is mostly carbon. And then all of you may have heard of biochar. So it's not biochar due to the method it's being produced, but it's kind of like very similar to biochar with different properties. And then also it has like some of the other good properties, that it's hydrophobic, it's porous, so that it can absorb the materials. And then if you further increase the temperature, you can liquefy the biomass into biocrude oil. And then kind of like if you further increase the temperature, you can, it's called hydrothermal gasification, which will be mainly converting it into carbon monoxide and hydrogen, which is again like pretty potential. But today I'll be talking about hydrothermal carbonization, and some of the uses of the hydrochar we produce would be for the use, it can be used for absorbing the pollutants like dyes, industrial waste, nutrients runoff from the water bodies, as well as it can be used for soil amendment, and it has like high calorific values, so it can also be used for solid fuel, and then it's rich in carbon, and so thus it can be sequestered to get the carbon sequestration. So just to demonstrate like an example, so dairy manure, as we are aware of, can be land applied, but while we land apply, it has like lots of benefits. But it will also, like, one of the issue is kind of like phosphorus or the nutrients being run off to the water bodies if it is not fully optimized or used. And then so we were trying to explore like few ways so that we can just recycle it to be used in the farm. So let's say we hydrothermally carbonize it and convert it to hydrochar. And then one of the other thing that we did was egg shell, which is again like a huge available in huge amount, and it contains calcium carbonate. So we mixed egg shell, ground it, mixed it with mixed it with dairy manure, and we carbonized, and then we activated it at high temperature and converted it to the system, and then we did some tests to see how can it absorb the nutrients, and then after it absorbs, it is rich in phosphorus, so it can be further land applied to get more benefits from it. And then so we did some lab tests to evaluate the capacity of dairy manure hydrochar, as well as the modified hydrochar on the phosphorus adsorption capacity. We found that just by hydrothermally carbonizing the dairy manure, we were able to increase the adsorption by 9 folds. And when we further modified it, we could update it by almost 20 folds. But if we just compare with dairy manure, it was around like 200 folds increase in its adsorption capacity. And then it's kind of like on the higher end of some of the information that are available in the literature. And then we also wanted to test it as a source for soil amendment. So we evaluated the system with and without hydrochar. And then, as you can visually see, and also through the results, we were able to, the lettuce produce were kind of like pretty, were higher in dry weight. And then we wanted to further test the system. So we went to different sites, fields in the northwestern Ohio, and we collected some of the undisturbed cores, and then kind of like simulated, tried to simulate the agricultural production system. And then we have amended it with hydrochar, and then now we are currently, our work are undergoing to understand the impact in plant, soil, as well as water. Before I conclude, just wanted to provide a brief commercial status. I know Josh and Harrison are worried about it, but my apology. Yeah, so far there are only 24 commercial operations throughout the world, and out of which only 1 is in US, and there are only 14 full-time full-scale plants. So there is huge opportunity, growth opportunities in this area, and there could be a lot commercial opportunity in this domain. So with this, I would like to thank my current and prior members of the group and the funding agencies, and would like to welcome Dr. Fred Michel to continue.
Okay, thanks, AJ. Hi, my name is Fred Michel. I'm a professor in food, ag, and biological engineering, along with AJ, and I'm located on the Worcester campus. And I've had a pretty long career here, but it's involved different areas of biomass conversion and also manure management and composting. And today I want to talk a little bit about some work we've done on composting and also anaerobic digestion. Our campus in Worcester provides about 30% of its electricity from an anaerobic digester located on our campus. We also have a composting facility where we compost all of the separated dairy manure, and we also do work with unseparated dairy manure composting. Okay, so how many of you have seen this book, Project Drawdown? So it looks at 100 determined global efforts to address climate change that are plausible and realistic. And it's really looking at 2 scenarios. One, to keep us at 1.5 degrees of global warming, which we've surpassed already. Another, to keep us below 2 degrees, a less ambitious goal. And if you look at the top 10, they include things like improved air conditioning systems. The climate's going to be warming. It includes things like on-land wind production, energy production, utility-scale solar production, transportation conversion to things like electric vehicles, which have twice the efficiency of gas-powered vehicles. And then if you go down the list, you get to about things that involve what we're talking about today, which would be anaerobic digestion, improved manure management, and composting materials. If you add those together, and I'm having a little trouble seeing here, it's, the impacts of those together can provide about 10% of some of the improvement we need to reach these goals. And they also overlap with many other goals. For example, reclamation of lands that have been degraded over time. So we've been looking at comparing really conventional and composting as methods for manure management, and a little bit of anaerobic digestion as well. But our conventional systems are pretty standard. Let me see if I can make this bigger. I can't see it on here while I'm doing this. Can't see what I'm looking at, unfortunately. So, let me go back. Oh, it's going here. Let's see. How do I go back now?
Use the arrows
Okay.
or the clicker on the right.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's two sort of systems we've talked about today. One is a conventional system where we have dairy manure production. We have storage in a storage lagoon, since we can't apply that year-round to land. And in those storage lagoons, we have the production of methane and a little bit of nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas, which we've heard a little bit about. And then we have, at large dairies, transportation and spreading at some place distant from the farm, or sometimes on their own farm. And during that land application, there can be generation of additional nitrous oxide. However, that can displace other fertilizer that would be used otherwise, including ammonia, nitrogen, and also phosphorus. Then anaerobic digestion, we have, as we've heard, capture of the methane in a digester. So it is a great improvement over this previous method where most of the methane is being emitted from these storage lagoons. And that's used to generate energy, displace grid electricity. Then, however, we also have, after the end of the process, storage, again, because we can't apply the manure year-round. And the residence time of the system is usually around 30 days. And there may be a couple of months during the year we can apply. So we have also storage that needs to be accounted for. And there can be loss of ammonia and nitrous oxide and methane during that process. So one thing that we heard about today is the methane production from manure. However, there's other feedstocks that can potentially be used, and many facilities do use these to contribute to their economic benefit of the facility. And those would include things that they can charge a tipping fee for, mixed with the manure, to increase the methane production potential of the digester. These can be things like food scraps or food industry wastes. Grease especially has a really high potential, so things like you may be using for biodiesel could be used also in a digester. And if you look at different forms of manure, some of them have fairly low potential for methane production. So you can optimize the system by including additional feedstocks in these. So this thing leads to what's called anaerobic co-digestion, where you're bringing in industrial food waste sources, transporting those to the digester, and mixing those with the manure in the digester. And those materials then, as in the other system, have a very similar downstream process. They're displacing grid electricity, perhaps a little bit more than that, but also you have the issue of digestate storage and transportation of the material off-site. Now, our calculations show that if you the distance you can transport dairy manure as it comes out of these digesters systems is about 10 miles before the nutrient value, the transportation costs exceed the nutrient value of what you're applying. So there's a very short radius of area where you can transport that financially without having to really pay extra to take it out. So another process we've looked at that can be used at some facilities is composting. And in composting, you're bringing in another feedstock, which would be something like yard trimmings, sawdust, or straw that may be available, bringing that to the site, mixing it with the manure, and then composting that. Also, you can do storage and separation prior to composting and compost the separated dairy manure alone without any amendment. The liquid, however, would be back into one of these other systems where you're storing it into a lagoon and applying it later. So there's some issues with that. With composting, it's an aerobic process, so the production of methane is very low. It's not zero, but it's very low relative to storing it into a lagoon or into a digestate storage system. There are costs for transporting it off-site but you're essentially using the energy of the manure to dry the material rather than creating methane. So you're going from something that's 85 to 90% water to something that's 40% water. And so the distance you can transport that material in the same amount of nutrients is about 7 or 8 times further. So you could have a radius of 70 to 80 miles around the farm where you could transport compost just at the nutrient value of the compost. It has other values as well, versus 10 to 11 miles. Compost can also be stored without generating methane and other materials. So you can store the compost until the compost is going to be used. Okay, so I need to get going here. So this is one study we did using the WARM model just to compare food scrap management via composting, anaerobic digestion, and landfilling. So most food scraps now are landfilled, which has a big methane production potential because landfills, although they do capture some methane, that doesn't usually happen till years after the material is deposited, and it's only a small fraction of the potential for food waste in those systems. So we just did a quick analysis, comparison of composting, anaerobic digestion, and landfilling of food waste. One thing to note is just the production of the food and how much energy and CO2 is involved just in producing the food that's wasted. So you put in 3,000 megatons of CO2 equivalent per 1,000 tons of food just to produce that food. So when you waste it, the biggest thing you can do is not waste food. To reduce the carbon footprint of food waste. But just looking in our town, we have a composting facility 5 miles away. We have a landfill 40 miles away. We have an anaerobic digester in our town, which is a unique system really for wastewater treatment. And the way that system works, it doesn't really transporting it at all. It's just going from your toilet or your garbage disposal in your home to the wastewater treatment plant. And the WARM model shows that the emissions from these systems are about negative 118 for composting, negative 95 for anaerobic digestion, and about 520 for landfilling. And that's, so even considering the energy use from the anaerobic digestion system, composting had a better carbon footprint relative to the anaerobic digestion. And that has to do with storage and methane leakage. The end product from composting versus digestate also has some benefits in that it has less phosphorus mobility in the compost material than the digestate. It's more concentrated, so it can be transported further. It has a lower nitrogen content. However, it has a less available nitrogen that can be a slow release source. Okay, and this is just an image of one site facility which composts some food scraps, some commercial food waste, and also manure. And this is the Herzl facility, which is south of Toledo. And you can see they have a mixture of different materials. All of these facilities have a compost turner like this, and the material is incorporated very quickly to prevent odor production. And then in conclusion, I'll just say AD creates renewable energy and reduces greenhouse emissions significantly compared to conventional manure management systems. Co-digestion can improve the economic returns of these anaerobic digesters. Composting transforms nutrients to less mobile organic forms, which reduces the potential for nutrient runoff compared to liquid manure or digestate when land applied. And composting has equal or perhaps a little lower greenhouse gas emissions compared to anaerobic digestion or landfilling, despite not producing renewable energy due to less fugitive methane emissions and lower transportation and application emissions. And these are some of my students and colleagues that I've worked with on some of these projects. Thank you.
All right, so we'd like to invite all our speakers to come up to the podium, please. And hopefully the audience has some questions ready to go. We've got about 20 minutes left for questions. Before we get started really quickly, I got to get one cow joke in. Why do cows have hooves instead of feet? Anyone know? They are lactose. Okay. As you would imagine. Okay. Did I give you enough time? Sudar, did you have a question? All right, let's start with Sudar.
Question for Jordan. The process seems very equipment and energy intensive with toxic gases. So could you just walk us through the economics of converting it to gas that can be used in an industrial setting?
So one of the big things that I did not go further into was our enclosed flare. So as I was saying on the raw gas coming to the upgrade equipment, it's at about 62% methane concentration. So from there, when it goes through the pressure swing absorption beds, that undesirable gas that is being sent to our enclosed flare, it's maintaining about 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. So any of those undesirable off gases are neutralized, so they're not going up into the atmosphere. So again, we're creating very high quality with very, very low emissions because of that enclosed flare and being able to maintain that high temperature to neutralize those undesirable gases.
Did that answer your question, Sudar?
Partially. I'm interested in the economics. In other words, are there local or state or federal incentives that makes it basically worthwhile doing? And like, what's the just overall percentage?
So yes, there are incentives like RINs credits and LCFS credits to incentivize us to go through this process. I can't really go into the numbers or what we're receiving back in numbers, but those are one of the big reasons why we're doing this, on top of being involved on the clean energy fueling, the CNG side. Obviously, the credits are a big bonus to us at the final production.
I think we have another. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Fred.
I think what we've learned from our digester on our campus and working with a different company that does this is that the value of electricity produced from the methane is at this level. The value of producing transportation fuel is much higher than that, and the value of putting it onto the grid is even higher. So it depends what you can get away with, and the purity level goes up with those different stages. So there's a balance, economic balance between those.
Harrison, let's do it. We've got another question back there, and then we can go to see if there's any online. And when you ask your question, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Ben Rosenthal. I'm an undergrad. My question is for Mr. Couch. How do you guys market yourself to the dairy farms, like in terms of the relationship that you guys are building and have?
So yes, we do market ourselves to certain dairy farms. Right now, one of the big things across the country for digester farm sites that are out there right now, most companies that have been involved with them, they're targeting 10,000, 20,000 head of cattle dairy farms, and we're doing it on a much lower scale. We're targeting, say, 1,700 to maybe 4,000 head of cattle for this process. And one of the difficulties is everything's on a much larger scale, including the equipment. Some firsts that have happened with us during the Sidney build and our second site build in Indiana is having literally the first two upgrading pieces of equipment to purify the gas. And our first winter, this winter, as soon as it dropped into the teens and 20s was difficult. But so yes, we do target and reach out to those dairies that are on a much smaller scale.
Eddie, is there anything you want to add in terms of what appealed to you about working with IGS Energy?
The fact that somebody was, the fact that they were willing to scale it down, as it were, to that level was, I mean, that was unique for our situation, you know. So, because as Jordan said, everybody that I'd come in contact with over the last couple of years, we're talking 5,000, 10,000, which that's not where we are. So.
That's great. Harrison, do we have any on the any online? Go ahead.
Yes, we do. So, quick shout out to our live stream viewers. For a program about dairy farming, we don't have too many people in Franklin County who are dairy farmers. So we're very lucky to be joined by plenty of people from all across Ohio on our YouTube live stream. So a quick question comes from someone on our live stream named Anna Skubanis. And the question is very similar to the previous one, but more in the flair of peer-to-peer networks and adoption of these innovative practices. So the question could be for Eddie, it could be for Scott, it could be for Jordan too, or any of the researchers. What are some of the ways in which these practices are shared, farmer to farmer, farm to farm? What is your typical way of sharing across the network?
You know, I'll take a first stab at it on behalf of the dairy industries associations. The dairy organizations that serve farmers are very quick to identify opportunities for investment and revenue generating resources while also meeting sustainability goals. So dairy farmers are very quick to attend conferences where speakers are being brought in with technical expertise. You know, I was just thinking as I listened to all you guys talk today, we just glossed over it. When they go to dairy conferences, there'll be an hour session on the details of how things operate. And then the farmers then have separate sessions where they're sitting down and across the table from IGS companies like you and talking through the mechanics of it and how it works and what are the financial attributes, but also what are the investments and what are the commitments they need to make. So farmers themselves are very quick to look for and be a part of solutions. It's up to us as trade associations and organizations that serve them is to serve those opportunities up throughout the United States. We do that here locally. It's happening in all the dairy industry, all the regions around the United States.
Jordan or Eddie, anything you want to add?
Yeah. Back to what we spoke about a little bit earlier on, being a 2,000 cow dairy in, call it a rural community in Indiana, Ohio, Midwest, we actually touch with a lot of smaller farms, you know, you're talking about possibly a 5 to 10 mile radius. So it is a community, somewhat of a community issue. And I think we do gain some synergy from that we are dealing with a lot of local people all the time.
Great. We've got one in the front of the room here.
Well, I'll just add one more thing to that.
Oh, thanks, Fred,
We
yeah.
do have an extension program called the Ohio Composting and Manure Management Program, which presents programs around the state for the last about 25 years. So that's another potential method of getting the word out.
Some good resources. Ari, did you have a question?
Yeah. How do you, two-part question. How do you counter some of the not in my backyard attitudes from people when setting up biogas facilities? And then how do you do that in a state where natural gas from fracking is so cheap, where biogas production is much higher cost?
I think in the design, like I said, when our equipment is not running, we have what's called a candlestick flare. It's an open flare. And if you're seeing a 6 to 8 foot flame all the time, that's a little concerning to the public. But when things are operating right, I mean, it's going to be 1, maybe 2% of the time that you're actually going to see that flame. The enclosed flare is a design on purpose, so it's not visible. You're not going to see that flame all the time. And honestly, Eddie, I think you would agree here, when we had the Sidney Chamber of Commerce come out, it was great. The public view of what we're doing in that facility was very, very positive. So I'm sure it's going to come eventually where we'll have some people that look at it from a negative light, but so far it's been very positive.
Great. Scott, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I really believe that the dairy community has been very sensitive to the neighbors around. So whether you're milking 30 cows or 3,000 cows, and that yours is just under 2,000, right? Regardless of the size of farm, when you work with animal products and you work with the byproducts, manure, there's an odor. That odor is reflective of its fertilizer. It's timely, it's organized, you do it right, you do it well, you have good neighbor relations, and folks understand that. One of the things that we've identified now with digesters is it's not only an environmental solution, it's also an air quality solution. It works to the benefit of the grain farmers who are taking the manure as being a pathogen-free, if you will, digestate that is now nutrient-rich. We are able to take out the solids and use it for bedding, use the liquids to accomplish that, recycle the water. When the community realizes the number of benefits that they achieve through the size of operations that we couldn't do on a 90-cow dairy that I grew up on, we could never do what we're doing with these guys. So seeing that work is really a testament to, are we as a society open to technology advancements? We always talk about innovation. Are we open to technological advancements, and are we willing to follow the science? As a dairy industry, the trade associations I work for, we are focused on the science and the balance of making sure that that science is fully understood by the community and the community benefits from it. So we all like to eat, but we also want to have a nice clean environment. We want to have clean waterways. We want to have clean streams, and the dairy industry is committed to do that.
Thanks, Scott. We have another question back here, I think.
Hello, I'm Sonam. I'm a grad student here at Ohio State. My question is about the cost and liability structure for energy companies and dairy farmers. So with enteric methane, there's a lot of feed additives that are being introduced, especially in other countries. And we learned about hydrochar amendments. Say some of these new implements that are being introduced in the market have some sort of effect on the manure that's produced. Do energy companies have a contract, or do they compensate dairy farmers based on the weight of manure provided, the percent of manure, the quality, a factor of all the combinations, how much energy they're able to extract, and what does that kind of look like? I'm really curious about that intersection. Are farmers limited, like Mr. O'Donnell, are they limited in what type of things they can introduce in their operation, or is it kind of a we'll take it as it comes and then we'll figure it out later situation? And I have a small follow-up question, if that's okay, but there was a bill introduced in the last Congress about methane biodigestion. There's rumblings it'll be reintroduced again in this session. Would you, from people in the industry right now, would you want legislation to kind of create these parameters right now, or are you hoping for a more of an environment where companies and operators can figure it out on their own, figure out these cost structure liability issues, and then have less incentives, less regulation? Thank you. Sorry.
I'll just pipe in real quick. So all farms all have nutrient management plans. So one of the limitations about how much of this material you can apply is whether it exceeds the nutrient uptakes of the crops it's being used for.
So as far as our partnership with the farmers all have involvement, and basically they receive a percentage of whatever we receive for value when we're injecting it into the natural gas pipeline. So big things that people really don't think about with the anaerobic digestion is certain situations with the cows, and they receive a vaccine and they have to be isolated because that medicine that they receive can alter the bugs in the manure and decrease production or damage thousands or potentially worse gallons of manure. So you could stop production completely just by not taking those things into consideration. I think on your question with the companies deciding, I think it's very important to be on the same board or playing field across the board nationwide, because if we don't have all the same standards, then you're not going to get the same quality of gas production. We have to keep everybody to a certain standard, starting at the farms, period. If we're allowing something to go on in one location, but we're not allowing it at, say, Indiana or Ohio, they have different regulations, then it's very cost ineffective for some companies that are held to a higher standard, and then other companies, they don't have to deal with that. That's
So Scott or Eddie, yeah, really, oh, I'm sorry, Fred, go ahead.
I think you meant antibiotics, maybe not vaccines, that would affect the manure.
Yes.
Right.
And let's just address the legislative initiative. First of all, when we as society are asking for one thing, we want to make sure that the legislation doesn't stifle that. So while we've got federal legislation that's encouraging alternative energy generation, right? We've got federal dollars that are being issued to encourage our farmers to implement those things. As I told the governor here in Ohio, we need to make sure that the state of Ohio is a state that welcomes innovation and technology. There's a commitment, however, that the industry that implements it does it right. If there are things that need to be improved upon to make sure that the odors within the community are not obnoxious, then do the right thing. Technology is there to fix that. What we want to make sure of is that legislation, while it has good intentions to protect the community, doesn't actually stifle the progress. So we have to have a nice balance. The tensions need to be identified, but the balance in legislation and regulation can't stifle progress and innovation. It needs to work in tandem. So my theory is, and our organization says, we want to work collaboratively with the environmental community, with our legislators, to make sure that the state of Ohio is open for business and we get more alternative energy generation that has the ability to produce year-round. Whereas with, for example, wind as an alternative energy source, it's not always windy in Ohio. There's plenty of it, I'm sure. But when you look at the alternative energy opportunities, we're in a really good position to take care of that. And when we do that, we're taking advantage of the benefits that we already have of 107,000 cows fully permitted in the state of Ohio to operate effectively and efficiently under the watchful eye of our regulations.
And
so
Scott,
we're very attentive to that.
Thank you, Scott. Great answer. And I will just say on the wind front, just like manure, we can store the energy that's produced when it's not windy. Eddie, really quickly, and then Harrison, we may need to wrap up unless you have any more online that you want to get to. Okay.
I'd
Last
like
word, Eddie.
to applaud the state of Ohio for their regulation and their oversight on these CAFOs. We have a great relationship with ODA on this, and it really is a pleasure to work with them. On the other question on, the dairies do receive compensation to a certain level by being involved in these projects. So viability is an issue. We got to stay viable through all of this. So, but yeah, thanks ODA.
Eddie, thank you. So our speakers are going to be sticking around, so those of you that brave the 9-degree weather get a chance to talk with them afterwards. But let's give them a big round of applause for being out here and sharing their experience with us. All right, we're going to ask you guys to come on down. Tim's going to say just a couple of last words here.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jordan, Eddie, Scott, Ajay, Fred. Thanks, Josh. Let's give another round of applause for our panelists. We're going to recognize each of you with a certificate. Harrison's going to hand out these certificates. They're to acknowledge your work and help us in helping us learn and shape the world for the better. So thank you all. Just for us to recognize, this is Josh's third certificate that he's received. We're putting him in the Hall of Fame here soon. This is exciting for me. This is a really cool program. For those that don't know, I'm an economist by training who studies environmental issues. And a lot of times what happens with environmental issues is what we're really looking at is byproducts or side effects of economic activity. And one of the solutions that come up from economists for dealing with some of these issues is figure out ways to put prices on these byproducts. And in this case, we have a byproduct, manure, from an economic activity, the production of food or the production of milk. And it turns out there's a benefit to it. The problem is the market didn't exist. And so you need a combination of solutions to try to create that market. And so it's really interesting to see this combination of government programs, private industry, individuals, groups, lobbying efforts, marketing efforts come together to create a market where one didn't exist and generate benefit to society and help to solve an environmental issue. A lot of times economists get a bad rap because they think, oh, we're trying to create money. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is figure out the most efficient way to solve some of these issues. And one way we can do that is by putting the proper prices on those effects. So it's really exciting to see a group like this come together. Prices also incentivize. They incentivize innovation. And so in this case, sometimes you need to overcome some of those initial costs, and so government needs to step in and provide some benefit to overcome some of those initial costs. And so we do have programs that generate those benefits. So it's really exciting to see all these pieces come together to solve an environmental issue. So, looking around, we know we have the experts here, but we have a number of students in the room. We'd like to encourage all of you to interact with our students. One of the purposes of the Environmental Professional Network is that networking piece to get students exposed to what the opportunities are out there. So please take the opportunity to work with some of the students. We want to once again thank NG North America and Ohio State Energy Partners for their sponsorship. Can we give them a round of applause? The support of NG and Ohio State Energy Partners goes towards supporting all students, regardless of school or degree level, to attend EPN events programs for free in 2025. Just a few announcements for upcoming events. On February 11th, we're going to have another EPN Breakfast. That's Tourism for Tomorrow, Sustainable Solutions for Travel, Ecosystems, and Economy in Ohio and Beyond. On March 25th, Water Reuse for Ohio's Future, Implications for Advancing Industry, Land Conservation, and Resource Efficiency. For those that want to stay updated, like I said, this is a networking opportunity as well as an educational opportunity. Sorry, my page is stuck together here. If you're not already a member, we ask that you become an official EPN member. You can do that for free you can scan this code here, or you can go to our website, create an account. EPN membership is the single best way to stay updated about upcoming EPN programs and other events happening in our region. Members can also post their own events and job openings to the EPN website for everyone else to see. So you can follow the directions here on the screen. Once you join, you become a member of our community. It's over 2,400 people strong. Postcards with membership instructions are on your table. And you can check out a list of our new members since our in the last month. And we have those scrolling on the screen here. Just a quick reminder as you leave, any of your reusable materials, the scarlet colored materials, can go in the bin here on the side. There's bins for composting, trash, recycling, all labeled here. So please take care to help us maintain that zero waste designation. And thank you to all of you, and have a nice day.